Hello. I think we should talk about emotional capacity. These days, I believe it's more and more important that each and every one of us has enough emotional capacity. But what is it, and why is it important? Well, to help us unpack that, I hope to use this rechargeable battery as an analogy. Or is it a metaphor? Is an analogy analogous to a metaphor? And what is a metaphor for? Anyway, I'm confusing things, and this is meant to simplify things, so we should look back to this in due course, when hopefully all will be clearer. To begin then, let's access this article. And this article describes emotional capacity. What is it? Well, emotional capacity is the ability to be fully present in your life, experience a wide range of emotions, and handle difficult feelings without falling apart. Falling apart is, of course, a technical term. Essentially, it's your ability to manage your emotions, overcome limiting beliefs, and manage stress. Beliefs will be mentioned later. Stress, I highlight just now because that is essential, not to have it, but to manage it. Having it is kind of comes with the territory for most of us, but managing it, well, if we're able to do that, then it's highly likely we will have more emotional capacity. Let's, however, change tack a little bit and look at resilience, because to have capacity, in my opinion, there's something about resilience in the mix. And this article here calls resilience, emotional resilience. And it says, emotional resilience is not about winning the battle. It is the strength to power through the storm and still keep the sails steady. Living in the era of technological revolution, every 10 years we adapt to changes that never existed in our life before. Seems like every 1 year these days. From rigorous digitalization to the 24/7 social media influence, from the changing professions to adapting with the ways of Gen Y, it is only natural to feel emotionally tied down at times. And that Gen Y, Z, V, A, I find strange. I don't know about you, but the need to sort of put everybody together in one homogenized whole. You're Gen Z. I mean, what is that about? It's like, everyone's individual. What I was saying, someone in the 20s or 30s or born between these dates, and some of the labels, when it is the letter as a label, they seem to drift and morph and change. I continually find myself having to go and look up and go, what does that stand for? Just tell us. I find that odd and actually not helpful and a little bit insulting. People are unique. We should remember that. Anyway, rant mini 1 over. Emotional resilience is an art of living that is entwined with self-belief. Again, we get that word belief in there once more. What we believe and how that can impact us negatively and positively is, well, in fact, it definitely is worthy of at least one separate video podcast. And I will come back to that in due course. For the moment, let's continue here. An enhanced cognition. Now, I believe that what this article is referring to is that if we're able to not be overpowered by emotions, and our ability to think clearly is retained, is protected. Back to the article, it is the way through which we empower ourselves to perceive adversities as temporary and keep evolving through the pain and sufferings. And that ability to think of things as temporary is also connected, as you might imagine, to belief, but it's also what is sometimes called a mindset as well. And I don't want to put too many of these terms in because they mean slightly different things to different authors. But I do believe that linking capacity with resilience, and ultimately, as we'll see, competence, allows you and me to get a better handle on what emotional capacity is and why it's important. So, in a broad way, emotional resilience means bouncing back from a stressful encounter and not letting it affect our internal motivation. It is not a bend but don't break trait. Rather, resilience is accepting the fact that I am broken and continuing to grow the broken pieces together. Continue to grow with the broken pieces together. Now, The reason that I've picked this article in part is because it mentions I am broken, and a lot of articles about resilience don't. So pause there for a second, I'll come back to it. The other thing I want to mention is that the capacity, the ability to have emotional capacity is connected to resilience. And resilience is, as often as not, connected to something to do with emotions, whether it's hope, we're keeping on going, whether we have a dream, we're thinking about who will help if we complete this task, if we stay the course. Feelings, emotions are also connected. So although it says emotional resilience, I've always thought personally that most of the time, one could argue all the time, but certainly most of the time, resilience is or has an emotional component within it. And I quite like someone calling it emotional resilience. And back to I'm broken. So many articles and papers and talks on resilience talk about you can be compressed and like a ball and you will bounce back, and it's how much pressure or compression you can take and how high you can bounce back and so on. And I think that's useful, and I don't want to be bleak and gloomy about it, but sometimes we do break, and I've talked about that over the years. That recognizing it is important and not hiding away from it, but we can put the pieces back together. They can actually strengthen us. Those scars that we pick up, so to speak, that ability to say, okay, what happened there? How can I avoid it next time? I'm a changed person. And naturally, in situations like that, we need, as often as not, we need help if we can possibly get it. And that could be friends and or professional help. But I think it's important to recognise that. And you may have been broken in some way in the past, and each and every one of us will have a different interpretation of what that means. But the ability to put that back together and then to continue learning is important in there as well. And I'd come back to a belief system that allows us to go forward positively can, well, ultimately allow us to function as well as we were at times, sometimes function in a different way, and sometimes function as better people and individuals in some ways. So let's then skip on to this word competency. And I mentioned competence, so here we are, emotional competency or emotional competence, some people call it. And this is talking specifically about leadership, but it applies to life, I believe, as well. So the author writes here, understanding emotions. The author, look at emotions as energy in motion, an energetic pattern that prompts a response. Feelings, then, from my perspective, represent conscious awareness of these energetic patterns. Emotions then seem to be the brain's best speculations about what our body's sensations mean in the context of the situation. Now, I've read this a few times, and my take on this is that what this author is saying is that we have some kind of somatic, we have bodily feelings no, let me call them feelings, otherwise I'll confuse you and me. Sensations. We have these sensations, and that pattern of sensation is an emotion based on this author's interpretation. Some people think of it slightly differently, but again, it's a good article, so let's stick with what this person has written. So those body sensations, we can call that pattern an emotion. And then when we label it, that is what we call a feeling, according to this author. And I, as I've said, I talk about it in a slightly different way, but each to their own. And I think it's important to get that bit in terms of this article to get the most out of the next part of the article. So, physical sensation, label that as an emotion, but via a feeling. So, something, stomach's tight, that pattern we could call generically those things that happen, an emotion. That emotion, when we label it, is the feeling. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling apprehensive. I think this is what the author is saying. And it's an interesting way to consider it. Anyway, I believe our thoughts highly impact our feelings, which in turn reinforce how we think and ultimately create a vicious circle that causes a ripple effect of supposedly unrelated events. Again, this is why I thought it was important to labour the feelings approach from the author. So I believe our thoughts highly impact our feelings. In other words, the labeling of that feeling, so if we said, well, that is apprehension, and because I'm feeling this apprehension, that can make me more apprehensive, is what I believe is being said here. And unless we become aware and name what we feel as a result of our emotional reaction, we might incorrectly interpret what happened. So again, the emotional reaction, this sensation, this pattern of feelings in the body is that's that emotion, that pattern, but the naming of it is when we say, I'm feeling this. Again, you may prefer that way of thinking about emotions, feelings, and sensations to other ones that you've heard. And so the interpretation becomes important. This is then important because labeling things, whether you want to go directly and say, well, I just label the emotion, I don't have to call it a feeling, and it just happens automatically, or I prefer it to be called a feeling from this pattern that is manifested from the body, that is this sort of patchwork of electrical impulses that, is an emotion, so hey, that's an emotion, but I need to label it by calling it some kind of feeling. Whatever way you want, the labeling, I believe, is important. The labeling I've talked about before. The labeling can help us with that cognition that we looked at earlier. And then, to change the trajectory of our reactions, we need to accept that we have emotions. So that's part of what's been written about here, and of course in many, many other articles and papers. So accepting that we have them, we're not machines. Believe it or not, some people don't really dwell on that too much. They just kind of react and don't consider for a moment, no, that's part of the journey. That's part of being here. You will have those emotions in some shape, way, or form. And then to understand where our emotions are coming from, I've talked about this before. What caused that emotion? What's causing it to bubble up? Where is it coming from? Was it something that happened yesterday? Is it something that's happening just now? Or is it something that's about to happen that I'm feeling that apprehension about? And then notice our impact on our interactions with others and the outcomes we deem to create. Again, this is also into the area of emotional intelligence, hopefully not to confuse. Remember, we'll get back to the battery. All will be clear, I hope. So part of emotional regulation and social awareness in emotional intelligence is noticing how we impact other people. It's noticing other people, but it's noticing how our emotional state, which is broadcast through body language, tonality, facial expression, behaviours, even an email sometimes, how that impacts and the outcomes we deem to create. In other words, is that how I wanted to come across? Is that what I wanted to say in this situation? Is this me? Is this the best version of me? All of that can help us with that. What I would say is in the broad area of emotional intelligence, but here we're talking about emotional competency, which I think is a really nice way to describe it. So once more, sort of Venn diagram territory. And then the article goes on. Our emotions impact our relationships at work, and our feelings shape their quality and predestine how we ultimately deal with challenges, communicate, solve problems, and make decisions. So our emotions impact our relationships. So that pattern of sensation that we then label as a feeling shaped our quality. Oh, I was scared. I was excited. And once more, I've touched on that before. It's a very big area, but some people will strongly suggest, to say the least, that the labeling of the emotion, or in this case, the feeling, as this author describes it, is really important in terms of how we consider that meeting went, that interaction. The labeling is often overlooked, but it is really important. Anyway, our ability to recognize emotions and appropriately evaluate situations at work is emotional intelligence. I've mentioned this already. Our capacity to manage what we feel in the moment, as well as to handle the emotions of others, is emotional competence. So to recognize emotions and evaluate situations, this may be the emotional state of others, and also the goal that we want to get, who we want to be, intelligence, emotional intelligence, but our capacity to manage what we feel in the moment, as well as handle the emotions of others. Somebody's negative towards you. How can you just rise above that? How can you not react or overreact? I've talked about overreactions before. How can we not do that? Well, that's emotional competence, according to this author. And I really like that. I think that's a really, really nice definition. And again, it's saying that, well, my interpretation is that it's saying that we don't want to be overpowered by those emotions. We don't want to overreact, and we need to be able to withstand some negative emotions at times from other people as well, obviously as positive ones. Don't get carried away with the praise, but also don't get beaten down when people are saying some stuff around you. But that's also resilience, you see. So this is emotional competency, but it's also, in my opinion, emotional resilience, or indeed resilience, which is why I was saying, if we look at these three areas, then we'll make more sense, in my opinion, of emotional capacity. And capacity, one could argue, is like the overarching description. It's the ability to, what was it said at the first article, at the beginning? To manage your emotions, overcome limiting beliefs, and manage stress, and also to be fully present and experience a wide range. So the capacity to do that, the resilience in the moment to be able to withstand the pressure, and the competence or competency to deftly to move around the emotions of you and others and get the outcome that you want, and hopefully that is beneficial for everyone. Now, what I want to do then is to go back to the battery. So to pull all those things together, I think one useful way to consider it is a battery, a rechargeable battery. That's us. That's our capacity. It's our capacity to do all those things, to bounce back, to repair ourselves if we are a bit broken, often with the help of other people. Let's not rule out other people being involved in this. And it is the ability, of course, to manage stress, to ensure that we don't fly off the handle, to take the pressure from other people, but not to bite back. Every day when we go about our business, we're losing some of the power. That charge is dissipating because we need to handle the stress. That causes us to use energy. We need to think clearly in an emotionally charged situation. That causes us to use energy. We need to find ways to pick ourselves up when something has knocked us over, to weather that storm. Energy. We need the ability to also look at other people and figure out what their needs and wants are. And that may mean being empathic to a degree. That causes us to use energy. And so that's all well and good, but this will run out unless it's replenished, which is why ultimately to recharge our internal capacity, our emotional capacity, we need to ensure that we get a good night's sleep, quality sleep. We need to ensure wherever possible that we can exercise. we need to ensure wherever possible we can get outdoors or at least look at it. We need to ensure that we have enough people around us who are helping us, who are not toxic, who are beneficial to us. And that's hugely important. Beware of those energy vampires. We need to eat the right food. We need to ask for help when we need it, and so on. And we need to practice self-care. You've heard of this stuff before, probably. What I want to do is add on this idea of the battery, or add in the idea of the battery, the analogy, the metaphor, whatever we want to call it, whatever works for you. As long as hopefully you get this overarching concept of we use the energy, and if we use it all up, then the next day, because we haven't slept, then what will it mean? We'll often overreact. We can't bounce back as easily. We often get floored by a simple negative comment that normally wouldn't have bothered us, because we don't have the capacity, we don't have the resilience, and we cannot deal with things in as elegant a way because we don't have that competency at hand. So we need to recharge the battery on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. And if we do that, then the resilience, the competency, and the capacity are all increased. I hope you found that useful. Let me know. Bye for now.